6.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that's normal.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to thank you for joining us at this afternoon's session on applying for tri-agency graduate scholarships, setting up for success. Before we get started here, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Adam Donaldson. I'm an Associate Dean within our Faculty of Graduate Studies, and I'll like to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items. So please note that this event is being recorded and that we will be distributing the link afterwards. Likewise, as we're going through the presentation, if you'd like to make use of the closed captioning, there is the option within your display platform there. Just look for the small CC button. So moving on. So before we get started, I would like to take a moment to recognize that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. The session format for today is going to include my initial introduction. We're going to have an overview of the tri-agency scholarships by our Scholarship Liaison Officer, Nikki Power. And then we're going to be following that with a panel discussion addressing some questions that were submitted earlier by those of you that have registered, as well as ones that we expect will come up over the course of this presentation through the live chat. Our panel discussions that are joining us today are Aaron Wunker with the Department of English, Kimberly Brewer with the Faculty of Medicine, and Brendan Leung with the Department of Applied Oral Sciences and School of Biomedical Engineering. As we move through the presentations today, I would like to note that there is the option for you to submit questions that you may have. So as we end up going through the different presentations, you can do so by looking for the small caption box up in the top corner of your presentation window. That includes a question box. As you enter those in, they'll end up eventually coming over and across, or you may end up getting a response if we need a bit more information on the question that you're asking. And once the ones show up there, you'll have the option of even upvoting other people's questions if they're ones that you're interested in as well. So with that being said, I'd like to invite Nikki Power, our Scholarship Liaison Officer, to jump on stage and provide an overview of what is going on with tri-agency scholarships. Thank you, Nikki. Nikki, if you're muted.
I apologize, I'm muted. Thank you, Adam. I had a feeling that was going to happen. Thanks everybody for coming, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about the processes involved with the applying for a tri-agency application and what some of the eligibility requirements are and deadlines and those sorts of things. So to begin, I wanted to explain a little bit about what the tri-agency actually is. For many of you who may have not applied before, the tri-agency is 3 agencies that provide funding for researchers in Canada, typically for research trainees, but also for other ongoing researchers. These 3 agencies are the Canadian Institute of Health Research, which we call CIHR, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, and the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council of Canada. And this slide gives a little description of what each of these agencies cover in terms of research. When you apply for a tri-agency scholarship, you will have to choose one of these agencies, because you can't choose multiple agencies. So you'll have to think very seriously about what agency best fits the research area that you're considering. The opportunities that are available for various folks from the tri-agency are the Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarship, the Canada Graduate Scholarship Doctoral Program, and the Canada Graduate Scholarship Master's Program. These are all for graduate students. For students who currently hold one of these scholarships, there's also a foreign study supplement that is available to those students, which allows students to travel abroad and do some research and get some experience abroad and provide some funding for that. There's also the Banting Postdoctoral Fellowship Program that we manage here at FGS that is available to postdoctoral applicants. Big question that often comes up at the very beginning is, how do I know if I'm eligible for these scholarships? So for Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarship, this is the only of the tri-agency scholarships that I'm going to talk about today that is open for international students. So foreign citizens are encouraged and eligible to apply for a Vanier Canada Scholarship, but not for the other three tri-agencies, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. It lists here on the slide the other eligibility requirements. Another thing that often is a common question is how long can a student be in the program before applying? And they can be no more than 20 months in full-time study as of May 1st, 2022, before applying for a Vanier. There's a Vanier competition going on right now. The deadline is September 30th. So I encourage anybody who's interested in applying for a Vanier scholarship to check out our website and the Vanier website and take a look at the eligibility requirements. The Vanier is in fact the most prestigious award that's given to graduate students by the tri-agency. It's a $50,000 a year award for 3 years. It's highly competitive. And so if it's something that a student is interested in, we highly encourage them to contact their supervisor and their graduate coordinator and let them know that they're planning on pursuing an application and to get their support for this application. So in terms of the CGSD, the Canada Graduate Scholarship doctoral level, again, you must be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. Unfortunately, this is not an opportunity that's open to international students. That said, we do have opportunities at FGS that are open to international students, and we'll talk about those in another presentation. But today we're just going to focus on the tri-agency applications. This is just for doctoral students. There's 2 levels of award with the CGSD. You might see it referred to as the PGSD in the NSERC agency. CGSD stands for Canada Graduate Scholarships Doctoral, but a PGSD is actually a second tier of awards given to students that apply for a CGSD award. So in each agency, they have their own values. They have their own different tiers of awards. The top value of CGSD for all agencies is $35,000 a year for 3 years. But for CIHR, 5,000 of that is actually research award. So it's a $30,000 stipend plus $5,000 for research. Again, all of this information is on the websites that I've attached to these slides, and these will all be shared afterwards. So you can take a look at in much more detail. In this case, you must be in your doctoral program no more than 24 months of full-time study as of December 31st, 2021. Another thing that comes up quite frequently is when am I considered to start my doctoral program if I transferred from a master's to a PhD? From a scholarship perspective, we consider the start date, and so does the tri-agency, consider the start date of your PhD the date of transfer. So if you started in a master's program and not completed it but transferred to a PhD, that is officially the start date of your PhD. So you count those 24 months from the transfer date. You can only make one application per academic year, but you can apply for a CGSD and a Vanier both in the same year, for example. So the Vanier and the Banting do not count to the limit of that, but you cannot apply to multiple agencies in 1 year, and you can't make multiple applications in one academic year. I'll move on to the next. For the CGSM, this is the master's level Canada Graduate Scholarship. Once again, it's only open to Canadian citizens and permanent residents, not to international students. And you must be in your program no more than 12 months of full-time study as of December 31st, 2021. You can also, again, not have held or hold a tri-agency scholarship or fellowship when you apply for the CGSM. So there are students that get a 1-year award. They cannot apply then for the second year of funding. You can only get one in an academic. You can only get one during your program. The core selection criteria for the CGSD is divided into 2 parts. It's researchability and potential, and relevant experience and achievements obtained within and beyond academia. For the CGSM, it's divided this way, 50% academic excellence, 30% research potential, and 20% personal characteristics and interpersonal skills. To apply for a Canada Graduate Scholarship here at Dalhousie, the first step would be to complete an application, an online application. The CGSD has 3 separate portals for applying. Each agency has their own management of the CGSD process and their own eligibility criteria and their own application form. So depending on which agency you've decided to go with, if you're applying for a CGSD, you have to go and apply directly to their portal, following all the very specific application instructions. The deadline for that we impose here at Dal is October 1st. So if you see a deadline online that says October 17th or some other deadline, those are not for students who are currently enrolled at Dal, who are applying through Dalhousie for the CGSD. So if you're at Dalhousie and applying for a CGSD award, or if you're planning to attend Dalhousie and applying for a CGSD award, October 1st would be the deadline. The reason that we set this deadline is because the next step in your application process is that we have to access your application and get it to our reviewers. So the next step would be to apply in our FGS Online Scholarship platform, and it's just a simple application where you indicate some basic information that will allow us to then go and access the application that you submitted in the portal and attach it to an application within Dalhousie that we can then have reviewed by the departments and then by our institution. For the CGSM, there's only one portal for all 3 agencies, so it's a separate portal from the ones for the CGSD, and the deadline is different. Their deadline is December 1st. And once again, we still have to go through the process of applying in the FGS Scholarship portal so that we can connect your application. Then your application will get linked, and as I said, to our system. It will be reviewed by the department that you are applying to, or plan to apply to, or are currently enrolled in. It will then be reviewed at the university level, and for CGSD applicants, there's a quota that we have to, that's been placed on Dalhousie, and within that quota we can forward that number of applications to the agency, and then there's a final level of review at the CGSD for the CGSD applications. For CGSM, the top ranked awards that we review here in the university are offered awards. Where do I go if I have questions about applying? So this is just a list of some resources if you're planning to apply. The first thing to do would be to visit the website, our web pages on these applications, because they give you a pretty good idea, and they also connect links to the agency applications and give you some information on not only the applying through the agency, but also what you have to do here at Dalhousie. The Government of Canada Vanier site is where they give you the information on exactly what is required for your application. As I mentioned earlier, consulting your proposed supervisor and graduate coordinator is always a great idea, and contacting me, which at this email address, fgs.slo@dal.ca, is also a good idea, because I can point you in the right direction. Same thing for the CGSD applicants. There's some resources here. Once again, these slides and this presentation will be shared afterwards, so you can find all these links. And for CGSM, I've listed the links here as well. For students that have been offered an award, there are a couple of places that they can go to determine how to maintain and manage those awards. The Tri-Agency Research Training Award Holders Guide, it covers all of the opportunities, the Tri-Agency that I just discussed, and it contains links to forms that students need, how to initiate their awards, how to take a leave of absence, how to go on, how to terminate their award if they've finished, and all the rights and responsibilities of students that hold Tri-Agency awards. We also have a document called Maintaining Graduate Funding at Dalhousie, which includes the rights and responsibilities of students, how they receive their awards, how they're paid, what they must do to maintain good standing at Dalhousie and from a scholarship perspective. So those are other just resources that students can access to find more information on this, on holding tri-agency awards. So that is it for me at this point. I'm going to send it back to Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Nikki. So at this point, we provided a brief overview of some of the different review criteria, and there's a considerable amount more information regarding those criteria on each of the websites that are referenced in Nikki's presentation. We understand, though, from previous years that it can sometimes be a bit of a struggle trying to prepare an application that aligns with those review criteria, and so quite often we end up getting discussions on how best to approach creating an application for these awards. And so what we're going to be jumping to now is a panel discussion with our different panelists here. So Aaron, Kimberly, Brendan, and Nikki will be joining as well for procedure-related questions. And we're going to move through a number of questions that were received as part of the registration process, as well as jumping into the live chat where I'm seeing a number of questions are coming up that we can address as we end up going through. So at this point, what I'll ask is we'll jump to the first question. So the first question here, which I'm going to start off by actually asking Kimberly to speak to this, is how do you prepare a project proposal so that it is understandable and appealing to reviewers who are not experts in your field? Kimberly?
Thanks. So that's a really good question, and it's actually a really important issue that a lot of students don't think about. When students ask me this, I like to tell them that a good project proposal should tell a story. And it should answer some of the basic questions, you know, who, what, why, where, and how. So we want to know what you're going to do for your project. And when I say what, you don't have to go into too many details. You may know that you're going to run 3 different types of assays or something like that, but the person reading your actual application probably has no idea what those assays are. So just keep it kind of to a broad overview. We also want to know why you're going to do it. Why is your project important? What are you hoping to accomplish with it? That kind of stuff is far more important in that big picture view than some of the little nitty-gritty details. We also want to know what your role in the project is. A lot of students spend kind of your whole project description talking about the big picture project, but you don't actually mention what your role is going to be. And that, as reviewers, are what we care about. You guys are the ones applying for the scholarships. We want to know what you're going to do. So one of the things that can be really helpful is to have a friend or family member who's not in your field read it over. That can help kind of look at whether or not you're using a lot of acronyms or jargon that really isn't understandable to someone outside of the field. A really good project proposal is also going to demonstrate how much you're interested in the area. You know, we expect that a lot of students are writing this, they haven't started their research, or they're just starting to think about the research. We know you don't know, again, those nitty-gritty details, and that's okay. But we want to kind of see your interest in the overall project. And what are you hoping to accomplish with this work? Why is your work important? I think that pretty much covers it. Back to you, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Kimberly. So we'll move on to the next question. And this one I'm going to end up sending over to Aaron for a response. So how can I compete with others who have prestigious extracurricular experiences with national and international organizations when my own are a bit on the plain side? So for example, tutoring, summer employment in the gym, or other similar areas. So Aaron?
Thanks, Adam. And hi, everyone who's there on the other end of the screen. Nice to see you. Like Kimberly and Brendan, I've also served on some of the national review boards, and my area of study is in the literature and the humanities. So I really loved and appreciated deeply both what Kimberly said and what is my true experience as well, which is you got to tell a good story. That story also has to be, it has to hold water. So you need to know what you're talking about, but you also want to spend some time hooking people into why you're excited about it. And I would say that if you're not able to explain to yourself in a short sentence or two why you're excited about your project, that would be a really good place to start, because as we're reading through these proposals, you can sort of sense the ones that are kind of lacking or needing a little bit more of that kind of contribution to the discipline or the field, right? And that often comes in the hook. How can I compete with others who have prestigious extracurricular experiences? The fact of the matter is that in the reviewing that I do for humanities and social sciences, those matter, but they do not matter as much as the project. Those get scored in the material that I see. Those get scored before we even sit down to discuss the projects. And so what matters is that you are clear about what you can do, what you have done, and how you are presenting that in a narrative to your reviewers, jury members. So if you are working at the gym, is that developing interpersonal skills with a range of stakeholders? Yes, it is, right? Are you, so thinking about how you're telling your story, this is kind of piggybacking on what Kimberly was saying. You want to be able to be both factual and accessible to a range of readers, because many people in the room who are reading through these applications are not working from the same places of expertise. The other thing that I would say is that it's really wonderful to ask someone else, probably several someones, to read your CV and your application, not only for the project, but for those areas where you're asked to talk about your experience, right? Because other people are going to see you in a slightly different way than you see yourself, and help you translate what you have done into something that might feel a little bit more dovetailed into the genre of scholarship application writing. So just to sum up what I've said, really have a sense of why you're excited about what you're doing. And that translates also into talking about your own experiences. If you haven't yet had the opportunity to have prestigious experiences, I certainly didn't, and have been successful with these national funding bodies. I was waiting tables as I worked through until I got my SSHRC as a doctoral student, and continued to wait tables because sometimes, needs must. You also really want to have other people reading and responding to how you're articulating your experience. And your letter writers would be really excellent people to do that, especially your supervisor. Adam, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. We'll move on to the next question. And so this question I'll actually send over to Brendan to answer. So what can we do to increase our odds, or increase my odds of getting a scholarship? So, Brendan?
Hello. Yep. So thank you, Adam, and hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Lung, and really happy to share some thoughts and experience with everybody. And since I'm the third person to speak, I know a lot of these points have already been touched by Erin, and I echo everything that Erin and Kim have already talked about. So I'm just going to add a few more things here, and maybe expand on some of those points. So this is a loaded question. This is a gazillion thing that you can do to improve your odds. But I'm going to start with something that maybe some people don't realize and think about. So first of all, read the evaluation criteria. So this is something that most people don't think about. So you just sort of think about the title of what they're asking for. So leadership, for example. Well, in the Vanier revision criteria, there's actually a very detailed description of what counts as leadership experience. And there's actually one thing I wanted to point out that is very important in there. One of them is goal achievement. So it actually says that this is their word, not mine, a clear vision of what they want to do, they being you, what they want to achieve, what they want to accomplish, develop a personal vision of the future, and define impactful, meaningful changes to the community and training. So this actually plays for both the proposal, right? So that's back to Kim's point, right? And Aaron's point, a story. So you want to be able to tell us what you're trying to do, right? And also for the leadership role as well. So, you know, sort of, you got to think about it. You know, why are you doing all of these extracurricular activity? What are you trying to do? Like, why? You know, what does this all mean? So the more you can contextualize it, the more you can, you know, build a little box and say, this is who I want to be, and these are all the things that I'm doing in my life to achieve it, the better it's, you know, it's going to resonate, you know, and it's going to, you know, the reviewer is going to look and say, oh, I see, you know, this all makes sense. So kind of like, you know, think about writing those as you would write a proposal, right? Now, the other thing is, you know, to echo, you know, Aaron's point, it's to be very, very clear, right? You want to be straightforward. To, you know, from non-expert, you want to be very, very clear. Most of the time, you know, the reviewer may not, if you're lucky, the reviewer understand why you're doing it and how you're doing it. But most of the time, people only understand one or the other. Or so, you know, you really want to drive home that they understand why you are doing it. One thing sort of, I don't know if it's a surprise for most of you, but reviewers don't have a lot of time to read proposals. So we're always in a time crunch. We might be reading half of your proposal before we pick up our kit, and then reading the other half when we come back from picking up our kit, right? So what that means is you really have to make it clear, right? You know, you may spend 30 days writing it. We might only have 30 minutes reading it, right? So the less guesswork you make for us, the better it is. And to the next point that Kim already said, is to show your proposal and material to non-expert, to your peers. And I understand it's very difficult to do. I myself, I'll be the first one to say, showing your proposal and your leadership letter to a friend or to somebody to get quick criticism is, you know, gut wrenching sometimes, you know, like it feels like gut punch for people to tell you that something is not that good, but those are the things that you really need. So do share it with people, because you won't be able to pick out all the mistakes and all the pitfalls on your own. And if I can just add one more thing, I'll wrap this one up. I know I'm going a little bit extra time. Make sure you pick good referee. This is something that I find some students don't appreciate. I had several students that asked me to be a referee, and I honestly don't remember a whole lot about them. And there were no CV attached to it. There's no reference. There's no proposal. I have no idea what's going on. So if you're going to ask for a referee, either that person knows you very well. In any case, it's always good to, you know, let that person update it with your latest CV. Show them your proposal, right? If they understand it, that's going to make the reference letter that much better. So that's all I have for this one for now. So back to you, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Brendan. So this next question I'm going to pitch out to Nikki, and it's whether or not I should even apply for these scholarships if I already hold other funding, or if I'm already in program. So Nikki?
Thanks, Adam. So the answer to this is absolutely. Students who already hold other funding should apply for as many opportunities as they can, and we encourage that. The reason being is that the Tri-Agency offers, for starters, they do offer some more, let's say, they have higher funding levels than some of the other awards. And the other thing is that they also offer some additional opportunities, such as, for example, I mentioned the Michael Smith Foreign Studies Supplement. So it's always a good idea to apply for these. We at Dalhousie we have a stacking policy. So students that hold Tri-Agency awards, as in addition to other awards, will receive their full payout of their Tri-Agency scholarship. And if it's less than our cap, then that we impose here at Dalhousie, and they hold other scholarships, then they may be topped up to the cap by other awards. If you're already in your program, yes, you should also apply, as long as you're within the time limits that I talked about earlier for master's and doctoral scholarships. Then yeah, you should absolutely apply. In fact, for master's students, Tri-Agency Award is only a one-year award, and it's one of the few that in-program master's students are actually eligible for. Some of our other awards are all entrance awards for the master's level. So because Tri-Agency offers a one-year award, we highly recommend students who are in their first year of their master's program to apply for that, and that way they can get some funding for their second year. I think that's it for me.
Perfect, thank you, Nikki. So moving on to the last of our pre-submitted questions before we jump into the live chat section. And this one I'm going to send over to Brendan for a response. My productivity really suffered during the pandemic. How should I address this in my application? So Brendan?
Okay, thank you, Adam. So with this one, again, it's a story is kind of what's going to help you out. I think there are many ways to, address productivity, especially during the pandemic. I think one of the criteria in the scholarship is, something about, overcoming obstacles and, doing something, taking initiative. So I think you really need to think about, okay, so I may not be as productive in terms of the traditional sense. I might not have been to the lab or wrote a paper and stuff like that. But what have you done? Like, have you done something else that you can speak about that is positive? That is, and of course, it's the pandemic. It's the pandemic. People have other duties. So I think it's like if you happen to be sick, just getting better. Being well and taking care of yourself. That's something very positive to do. So then I actually think this should read, if you're talking about the productivity and leadership, it should really read as something about you taking initiative, working towards a goal and doing something positive for yourself, right? So I think if you can speak about that, that should be fine. I wouldn't pay too much attention as to what you have not done. Actually, I think it kind of flips it around and say, like, given that it's a pandemic, these are the things I'm still able to do. So I think that, and it comes through in your writing as well. I think that would be a much better thing to go from a positive direction. So, yeah. So that's it from me. Back to you, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Brendan. So at this point, we're going to dive into some of the live question and answer sessions or items that have come up. And I've gone through some of the ones being posted. And I'm going to try to summarize a few of these just so that we can capture a couple at the same time. And I'll be calling on the respective panelist members here to provide some responses. So I'm actually going to focus a little bit on some of the procedural ones first, just as there are quite a few in there that are themed around this area. So Nikki, I'll be drawing on you to answer a few of these if you don't mind. So the first one that I'm seeing in here is there's questions around the application process and just requesting some clarification on, we'll start with the CGSD, whether or not they have to submit the application through Dalhousie. So depending on where they currently are studying, if they're studying at another institution and they're just planning to come to Dal versus if they're already at Dal, and then how they would end up uploading transcripts. So Nikki, I'm not sure if you could speak to where they should be applying based on the tri-agency criteria, and for NSERC, how they managed to get the transcripts uploaded. So to you, Nikki.
Thanks, Adam. That's a great question. In terms of where you should apply, the Tri-Agency has actually got a very deep, they get this question very frequently, and they have put together a process map that they have on their front page of their CGSD website. I believe it's on the it's just on the CGSD website, and it tells you where to apply and when based on where you're currently enrolled. Students who are currently enrolled in a university with a quota are actually supposed to apply through that university. Students who are not currently enrolled in a university at all, or who are enrolled in a university without a quota, are to apply directly to the agency, and the deadline for that is October 17th. And then students who are applied who are enrolled at Dalhousie, that is a university with a quota, so you would apply through the university. Again, this is very detailed on the website for the CGSD. So if you take a look at that, if you're not sure, you should be able to get a pretty clear idea of where you should apply. In terms of NSERC transcripts, NSERC is the only agency that requires transcripts to be uploaded to us, and then we upload them to the agency. In that case, that is another reason why we ask everybody to also do an online application through our FGS Scholarship Management Portal. What you'll do there is you'll be asked as an NSERC applicant to also upload your transcripts to that portal, and then I'll have access to those, and then I'll be uploading them to your application. There's a spot in your application for NSERC that asks for the name and email address of the individual who will be uploading your transcripts on your behalf, and that would be me, and that's all listed on our website. It would be me, Nikki Power, and my email address, fgs.slo@dal.ca. One thing that's really important, though, when it comes to uploading transcripts is that you are responsible for ensuring that your transcripts are complete and accurate and up to date. It's up to the student to ensure that the transcripts that they give to me to upload to the agency are exactly the transcripts that are required based on the information in the application directions. We've had very unfortunate situations where there have been transcripts that weren't up to date, and it will cause a rejection of the application. So something really important to keep in mind when you're uploading transcripts, even though you're not uploading them directly yourself. I think that answers that, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Nikki. And so then another common theme question, again, around the procedural one, so just clarification regarding your presentation. So of the awards that we've discussed today, which ones are eligible for international students? And then I guess maybe a follow on that is, where would an international student go to find awards that they might be able to apply to, or where might they get more information on that in the future? So Nikki, back to you again.
Another great question. Thanks, Adam. So international students are only eligible for the Vanier Award of the awards that we discussed today. In terms of other awards available to international students, if you check out our website, the funding opportunities section of the FGS website, there's a list of all of the awards that are available to all graduate students that are coming to Dalhousie. Most of them are managed through our harmonized scholarship process. So if you click on the link to that, you'll see the awards managed through there, and most of those are open to international students. So it's kind of just a matter of navigating our website to see what opportunities we have available to international students. But unfortunately, in terms of tri-agency, it would only be the Vanier that we talked about today. I think that's it, Adam. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. So moving through the list, I believe we've addressed the questions around international student eligibility and regarding where to apply. So for CGSD, there's the application through the online portal, as well as through Dalhousie's scholarship platform to help with the review process. For Vanier, you would only apply through the Vanier site. So at this point, I'm actually going to jump over to our other panelists to try to address some of the other ones. So the first one I'm going to actually ask, and I think Erin might be a great candidate to answer this one, is, can you use the pronoun I in the proposal? So Erin, if you're willing to jump on that one.
Yes, you can. It's actually, I mean, it's a really wonderful question, especially depending on your home discipline, because so many different disciplines kind of train us out of taking ownership for the work that we're actually doing. But I think in the genre of scholarship writing, I will do this I will do this in this order, right? It's going back to what Brendan was saying about not only having a story, building on what Kimberly began us off talking about, but also contextualizing and providing a clear timeline for your research. So the first person pronoun works. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. So the next question I'm actually going to send over to Kimberly. So Kimberly, I have one here that I'm a new student and I'm just starting with my supervisor for this term. Do I need to ask them for their reference letter, given that they may not have gotten to know me yet? Or I'm assuming the implied question is, can I go to my previous supervisors instead and ask for reference letters from them? So Kimberly.
Thanks, Adam. It really depends. So if you have a previous supervisor that knows you really well, they are definitely a good person and probably the better person to get your reference letter from. As I think it has been mentioned by Brendan, your reference letter is really important. And if you don't have a good reference letter, it can hurt you. So the better your reference knows you, the better are you off. That being said, there's a lot of students at the beginning of their careers who don't have a previous supervisor. This one is basically their first supervisor. In that case, what I would recommend doing is go to the supervisor. They're used to this. I've done it several times. Most supervisors have. Give them your CV though. Talk to them about, the project. Give them the project proposal. They presumably had a reason for taking you on in the first place, so they already have some kind of positive opinion about you. So they generally will say positive things, but it can be really helpful because if we haven't got a chance to really know you, giving us your CV and even just sitting down and chatting for a few minutes about your application will give us more to work with, and we can write a more directed letter. So the answer is basically, it depends. If you have an old reference, use them. But if you don't have that, then I think you could still get a really good reference letter out of a new reference. Back to you, Adam.
Excellent. Thank you, Kimberly. And I also see that Erin has an additional point to add to that response. So Erin, to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what Kimberly was saying and remind folks that typically these applications are asking for more than one reference letter as well. And so an old reference from a previous supervisor who knows you super well, and then a new reference from the place that you're already established in, new to Dalhousie, for example, and a supervisor that you're hoping to work with is a good idea too. And the suggestions that Kimberly made for even just a small introduction, sitting down and giving your reference letter writers just a little bit more about you, a little bit more context, to borrow the word that Brendan started us off on. Yeah, so just remember that you could do both too. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. And actually, I also see that Brendan has one additional comment to add to this. So, Brendan.
Thanks, Adam. This is a fun topic. Yeah. And actually, yeah, so building on top of what Kim and Erin have already talked about, especially now with Zoom and Teams, it's so easy to dial in to talk to your supervisor or your previous supervisor. I would encourage you all to actually have a conversation. And I think as a reviewer, I open a letter of reference. I'm not expecting to see bad things. I mean, anybody can take a CV and say this person have done X, Y, Z, and da 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 da, and stuff like that. So to me, that's kind of boring, right? What I'm really looking for are those interesting story, interesting insight, and you can only get that by actually spending a little bit of face time. So if your supervisor or previous supervisor are willing, definitely have a chat. It's super easy, just 30 minutes, and tell them you want to have them feel that passion and excitement that you have for the project you're doing, and they will translate that into the letter. And that's when you have a letter that kind of stands out in the crowd, So I think that's kind of the extra special sauce for a good letter. Back to you, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Brendan. So we're going to move on to another question on here. So I have one that's a little bit more procedural in nature. So if a student is currently in the master's program and they're considering transferring into the PhD, should they apply for the CGSM or the CGSD, or I'm assuming can they apply for both? So Nikki, I don't know if you wanted to tackle that one.
Sure, thanks, Adam. So if a student is in their master's and planning to transfer to a PhD, I would certainly recommend that they apply for doctoral level awards, so for the CGSD. If they currently do not hold a master's tri-agency award, they could apply for the CGSM. The only issue with that is you can't apply for both at in the same year. You can't apply for CGSM and a CGSD and kind of hope for hope that the best thing happens. So I would suggest certainly that you apply for the CGSD award. And if you currently hold a CGSM and you don't get a CGSD, you'll continue to hold your CGSM until whether you stay in the master's program or transfer to a PhD, unless you your award is increased to a doctoral level award, you can continue to hold your master's level award until the actual end date. So so yeah, I guess the short answer is yes. Apply for CGSD if you're planning to transfer. It can't hurt. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Nikki. And I apologize. We have kids coming home from school in the background here, so dogs may bark in the background. So I do apologize for that. We'll move on to one of the next questions on here. So I have a question that someone was chosen as an alternative last year for the CGSM scholarship, and they're asking whether or not they should reapply this fall, if they'll have a higher chance of success in their second application, if they reuse it. So I might just quickly note on this one. So if you're still eligible, you can apply, but I strongly encourage you to update the contents of your application. Having a gap in your application material relative to what you submitted a year ago probably is not going to improve your chances. So anytime that you're applying, try to have the most up-to-date information you can on your application as it comes in. So with that, I'm going to jump to the next one, and this one I'm going to actually send it over to Kimberly. And so Kimberly, how would I deal with having only one publication on my application? How important is this in the process of choosing successful applicants? So go ahead.
Thanks, Adam. So this is highly field dependent to start with. Every field has very different kind of expectations in terms of what's reasonable for publications. There are some fields in physics where you just don't get a first author publication because you're working with large labs. There are other fields where they might expect to see 2 or 3. So in the first place, it's going to be very field dependent. So when reviewers are kind of looking at a bunch of different sub areas, we tend to play conservative. So, you know, we're not necessarily going to penalize people for having fewer publications. It also, of course, depends on where you are in your program. One of the things as reviewers that we're supposed to look at is how do you compare to other students who are at this place in your program? If you're a first-year master's student, we do not expect you to have a publication at all. So if you have one, that makes you look great. If you are a third year, which I don't even think you could be, so even say a second year PhD student, and you have one publication, that's probably about average actually. And so I wouldn't necessarily worry about it. It's less about quantity, and honestly, I would just emphasize what is in the publication. There's a section where you get to discuss kind of your contributions. And so talk about what it is you achieved in that particular publication. You know, what did you do as part of the publication? What were kind of the outcomes, and how did this publication, do you think, advance the field forward? We generally don't necessarily count numbers. Like I said, it's really more about kind of quality of what we see. And again, depending on where you are in your program, we might not expect you to have a publication at all. So thanks, back to you, Adam.
Excellent, thank you. So at this point, next question I might toss over to Erin. So Erin, there's a couple of questions in the chat around GPA and its importance in scholarship consideration. So I was wondering whether or not you might be able to comment on how important GPA is and how it plays into evaluating criteria compared to some of the other information provided in the application.
Sure. GPA does matter, and that is where your transcripts come into play, because reviewers have the opportunity to review those transcripts, and we can look at a trajectory over time. So if you have a wobbly GPA, let's call it, in your first year of university at the BA level, and you're applying for a doctoral SSHRC, for example, your GPA from your first year of your BA does not matter that much, right? We do start to ask questions or perhaps pay a little bit closer attention the closer the GPA is to the time and situation of where you are when you're applying. But then you got to also think about these applications as a holistic package, right? Your project proposal, your CV, your transcripts, and as everyone has said, and I will reemphasize here, those letters of support are crucial. And Brendan, I mean, it's quite nice to, when these things happen and people that you've never met or have only met very much in passing are so totally synced with the kinds of things that you want to say. Brendan has already used this word context so much. If you're able to contextualize wobbles in a GPA, or a supervisor perhaps is able to contextualize what is happening in a reasonable fashion, juries are given ways to address those on a case-by-case basis. But you know, the fact of the matter is that these are scholarships where we are looking at the holistic package, so the application plus your scholarly promise, your track record thus far, and then those letters of reference. So it really, again, it depends. But having an open conversation with someone like Nikki, as well as with your letter writers, is going to put you in a stronger position to be able to take ownership of your academic history. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect, thank you, Erin. And one item I will end up noting is within the university, at least from a basic eligibility criteria, we typically do not make applications ineligible based solely on GPA. So even if your GPA is not first class, which is typically considered a 3.7 or above out of 4.3 at Dal, even if it doesn't fall in that criteria, that will not immediately make you ineligible. There's normally an opportunity for you to justify why your GPA might be slightly below that, or to provide some context. So Erin's comments are really quite important in that regard, that GPA is important. Reviewers do look at it. There are a lot of variations between fields, but it is also important to remember that it is not a hard cutoff. So just because you're at a 3.6, don't make that the reason why you do not apply. Consider whether or not there are other factors which may end up strengthening your application and allowing it to be successful. So I'm just going to jump into the additional questions on here. So I will ask this one off to Nikki, if I may. There's a question around what funding opportunities exist for students who would end up applying in January, or who are starting their program in January. So Nikki, if I can jump that one over to you.
Sure, thanks, Adam. I actually, before I answer this question, I just wanted to add something on to what Adam just said about GPA calculations. I often get a question about how is my GPA calculated and what's it based on. We don't do GPA calculations here in FGS, but we typically look at the last 2 years of a student's study when it comes to kind of, if you want to know whether you have a GPA that's close to 3.7, you would be looking at the last 2 years of study from a scholarship perspective. In terms of the question, can you remind me what the question was, Adam, please?
So are there opportunities available to students who apply in January?
There are. What happens is, if you apply for a tri-agency scholarship, you have to select the start date of the scholarship. So the first opportunity for you to start a scholarship in this particular year's competition would be May of 2022. If you're starting your program in January of 2022, that's fine, but you won't be able to start your award until May. And the reason for this is because the competition season doesn't actually end until after January, and the award announcements won't be made until typically April. So May 1st would be the earliest possible time to take up an award. So you certainly go ahead and apply if you're planning on starting in January, but just with the knowledge that the earliest possible start date would be May of 2022. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect, thank you. Brendan, I'm not sure if I can toss this question over to you. So there's a few questions around the ID PhD program. So that's the Interdisciplinary PhD program at Dalhousie University. Specifically wondering whether or not that program has any different eligibility criteria for these awards, or if it makes a difference as to what PhD program you're applying as to which award you might go to. So I don't know if you might try to comment on whether or not the program has an impact, or if it's a research area that would primarily determine where you would apply. That might be the easiest way to try to figure out where to answer that question. So Brendan?
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. This is outside of my experience a little bit. I don't think I've actually reviewed one from the Interdisciplinary PhD, but if I were to see one, I would evaluate it very similarly to how the other ones are. You know, the story is important. I don't think, you know, the discipline really makes a difference as to, you know, the importance of, you know, telling a good story and telling me why you're doing it and if you're the right person to do it, if it's impactful. So, you know, I don't know if in terms of eligibility, and maybe Nikki can speak about that, you know, if any of those things change. My feeling is probably not, like maybe some of the, you know, application pieces, you know, in terms of reference letter or nomination and where those come in, that might change a little bit depending on department. But just strictly sticking to the proposal and the leadership piece, I think it's going to be about the same. I think that's what you're asking, right? Like, does the IDPHD have different evaluation criteria, right? You're asking? Yeah, to me, I wouldn't think so. Like, if I see one in my box, I'm not going to go out and look for a different set of criteria. Like, I'm just going to evaluate the same as everything else. So back to you, or back to the panel list, if there's any other thing to add.
Oh, so I'm not seeing any. So thank you, Brendan. Yeah, then I'll move on to another one here. That's I got to pass to Nick here. This one I might try to answer myself. So there's a question here regarding if a student has a disability, how can they disclose this in the application and what impact might it have? So most of the scholarship competitions that are run through Tri-Agency have the option of self-identifying. So you can self-identify based on whether or not you are an Indigenous student or a member of a racial minority, as well as whether or not you have a permanent disability. That information is collected by those agencies for statistical purposes only. They typically do not pass that information on to the university level. So normally a reviewer would not see that self-identification. That is strictly within the Tri-Agency site for them to track. So whether you self-identify or not with a permanent disability, it would not have any impact on your application review. The one area where self-identification does matter is around Indigenous students for our CGSD doctoral applicants, strictly because within those, if we have applications who are identifying from that group, they are able to actually have their applications submitted beyond our normal quotas. So Indigenous students are encouraged to apply. It's again a case of none of the reviewers will see that information or have it actually go through, but what it does allow is it allows for applications to be forwarded above and beyond our normal quotas. And so I also see that one of our panelists, Kimberly, has additional response to that. So Kimberly, if I can hand it over to you.
Thanks, Adam. So for NSERC, at least, they offer the opportunity to fill in what are called special circumstances. If you wanted to put that information in there, I have seen it in there in the past. In a lot of cases, it tends to be used to contextualize certain things that they do or don't do. For example, students that aren't able to travel And so their conferences are all within the province. Having that information sometimes can be helpful. I do think it's up to the students as to whether or not you think that it is relevant to your application. But if you want to contextualize, and you're worried that, maybe they think that you're not going to be doing enough or things like that, you certainly can put it into either a special circumstances section or the section where you talk about things like leadership or training or things like that. Those are valid circumstances, and reviewers will take that into account. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Kimberly. That's an excellent point, that the special circumstances section is an area that is visible to reviewers. And so it is a great area that you can provide context. So thank you, Kimberly. So moving on, I have another one here that I'm going to toss over to, I think Brendan was next on the list here. So generally, do current PhD students have an edge over master's students when they're applying for the CGSD? So, Brendan?
Thanks, Adam. Do current PhD students have an edge? I think the edge might be your project a bit better. Yours, I think all the supporting document, with your supervisor, that it's going to be stronger. So that's, I would sort of see like an edge, but we, as reviewer, we also take that into consideration, right? So it's if you're further in the program, we do expect to, those area to shine a little bit better. So, but there is, you're right, there really is no like hard and fast rule and say like, if you're in PhD program already, I automatically add some points. So, or I'm saying there's no equalization step to it. So I would say that the short answer to that question is yes. It probably does. Yeah. I don't know how the rest of the panelists feel about that. But back to you for now. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Brendan. Not seeing any other comments from the rest of the panelists, so I will jump on to another one here. So there's a quick request for clarification from Nikki around GPA in the last 2 years of study. So I guess, would you mind just clarifying that's GPA calculation for CGSMs, whether or not they're done or not, and if yes, where that is based on? So Nikki?
Sure. They're not actually done. A GPA calculation is not actually done. They had been done in the past and provided to reviewers, but that's no longer something that we do at FGS. The reason being that, like all of the other panelists have said, they're trying to look at applications from a more holistic perspective. And so to concentrate too hard on that number, that 3.7 number, takes away from the other aspects of the application that might make a difference to the success of the application. So we don't actually calculate GPAs, but what I'm saying in terms of, if you want to know that that you're going to be competitive, that you have a first class average, typically what the tri-agency indicates is that they like to see first class average in the last 2 years of study. So if you just are starting a master's program and applying for CGSM, you would look at the last 2 years of your bachelor's. If you're PhD student, you would tend to look at the last 2 years of your master's program, or if you're transferring, it would be a year of master's and a year of bachelor's. So that's just it's just kind of a guideline that, and that's why I brought it up, is because often students will come to me and say, well, I don't know if I'm even going to be competitive. Do I have I don't know if I have a 3.7 because I had a really bad first year in my bachelor's. Well, that's why I'm saying you really want to concentrate on in determining whether or not you're competitive from an academic standpoint. You want to look at the last 2 years of study, and just take a look at Canadian transcripts are all fairly straightforward. So it's pretty simple to determine that you have a 3.7 on a 4.3 scale. There's also a GPA calculator on our website. that I believe is provided by the admissions department. So it might be something that you want to just, take a look at, just to give yourself a sense of how competitive you might be from a GPA perspective. But once again, like Adam said, we won't reject applications that have a GPA that's below 3.7. But it shouldn't be significantly below 3.7. So it should, we're talking about a matter of a few points here and there, but not a significant difference. Otherwise, it just means that you're not going to be competitive. I hope that helped. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Nikki. Actually, I see a couple of questions here. So the first one I'm going to send over to Kimberly. If I submitted a paper but not published it yet, can I mention this in my application? So Kimberly, would you mind grabbing that one?
The answer is yes, absolutely, definitely. If you have submitted a publication, we automatically count it. We know the process for getting papers accepted often takes years sometimes in some fields. So once you've submitted it, it counts. Just tell where the journal is. And if you have a submission number, I recommend including it. Some students will list if they are working on a publication. That's fine. If you are working on a publication from previous research, you can mention it, but it doesn't get lent as much weight as one that is already submitted. So we basically count if it's submitted, we treat it the same as accepted. Thanks, back to you, Adam.
Perfect, thank you. Aaron, I don't know if I can throw this question over towards you. So I have a 7-year gap between my master's and the start of my PhD this fall. Do I need to explain this? So Aaron, I don't know if you can provide a response to that.
Hi, it depends, I think, and it probably depends on whether or not you feel like you need to explain it and whether or not your proposed supervisor or reference letter writers feel it needs to be explained. Frankly, life happens. People come back and return to graduate study for all sorts of reasons. That's neither anomalous nor frowned upon. If your gap between the 2 degrees is in some way interesting for your narrative, that might be a really good reason to hook it in. But having a gap between a completed degree and the beginning of another one is not so strange. So you may want to address it briefly if you feel it's significant for your reviewers to understand your entire application. And if you're not sure, right, if this doesn't feel like a satisfactory answer from me, then I would ask the people who are familiar with your file in addition to yourself, and those would be your reference letter writers. Is this something that they feel needs to be explained? My sense is probably not, although my co-panelists, Kimberly, for example, will have additional insight, so I'll pass it over to them. Kimberly?
Thanks, Aaron. I agree with what Aaron says. I don't think you have to explain anything. It's very common. We see it a lot more, I think, than people realize, people who've been away for several years and then are coming back. The one caveat is sometimes it makes for a really interesting story. And I don't think people give themselves enough credit. In that time, people have worked a variety of interesting jobs. I've seen former teachers who are now, going back to grad school, people who've worked in industry. In a lot of cases, I think you can use that gap to talk about a lot of the skills you've acquired. Things like leadership skills in your workplace and other, writing reports, if you wrote technical reports, things like that. They actually have a lot of weight for us because they're, we can tell you did things in the real world. And so you don't have to explain anything. In fact, I would encourage you not to think of it as something that's like, oh, that's bad, I have to explain that away, but treat it as a positive and be like, yeah, I've done all this stuff in the meantime. And now I'm going into a different area, but I can totally apply all these skills that from this into my new research. So, so thanks. Yeah, back to you, Adam.
Actually, I'll send it over to Brendan. Brendan, if you would like to add to that.
Yeah, just want to. Oh, sorry. Yes, just want to agree with what Aaron and Kim have said. And sort of add to that as well. It really also depends on the field. Some field I know are not, there's just not a lot of people who do a PhD. Like you're totally like masters where most people stop at the grad study and there's, and they go out and they do their work. A lot of health professionals are like that. So it's not, it's, they often go out and work for a while and then come back and do your PhD. So I think just want everybody to remember that if you don't explain it, I'm not going to look at it and assume that, this 7 year you've been in jail or something like that. I'm not going to think automatically something bad happened. It's at worse neutral, right? And like Aaron and Kim said, if you have something really cool to talk about, please do talk about it. And once again, going back to the criteria of leadership and think about all the things that counts as leadership and self-improvement opportunity, and really don't be shy about it. Okay, yeah. Back to you, Adam. Perfect.
Thank you, Brendan. See an interesting question on here that we might actually run through each of our panelists. So I'll start with Kimberly on this one. What are some common issues you see in the applications that greatly minimizes your chances of receiving the award? So Kimberly?
Well, that's a tough one. I'd say not making any effort in your application is kind of the obvious one. We can tell when you didn't spend very much time working on it. It's just a cursory list of your achievements. It's just a very cursory, and I don't mean cursory in the sense of short either. Some people just write a list or things like that. I think all three of us have talked about story at some point. The more effort you put into kind of linking everything together, the easier it is for us to read, and the more you stand out. That kind of stuff, making it easy to read, I cannot emphasize how important that is. I would also apply that to things like proofreading. Proofreading is really helpful. We're not going to hold it against you, but it makes it easier to read. And we tend to just be in a better mood when things are easier to read. It helps us remember things. And it's just the type of thing that it's going to stick with us more. So I guess I'll pass it on to Aaron, maybe.
Yeah, I completely agree that spending time on quality control is really important. And that quality control includes the narrative, the facts, and the package that you put in you put it into, which is the proofreading and the copy editing. The frustrating thing, if this is your first time applying to Tri-Council awards, is that you write things out beautifully in the font that you like in a Word document, and then you copy and paste it because you're not writing it straight into those boxes and not saving yourself a copy, right? You're writing it in a Word document or something similar, saving it and moving it into the application so you can refer to it later. That seems like a really practical thing that needs to be reinforced. Don't write it only into the application box. But when you put it into those Tri-Council boxes, the formatting gets messed up. Your spaces that you've put in for jurors to read it and have it like an ocular rest between paragraphs gets messed up. So give yourself some time to do that as well. And then the last thing I'll say before I pass things over to Nikki is to spend some time, and I say this to the graduate students that I work with regularly, if you are done working on your project proposal, all of that written narrative stuff that we've been talking about, spend some time with like some music on in the background or a television program running, filling in those drop-down menus, right? That's the stuff that takes an enormous amount of time that you think you can knock off in much less time than it actually takes. But it's also stuff that while you need to pay attention, it is not the sort of the intellectual heavy lifting that writing your proposal is. And so time management would have been a more succinct way, ironically, for me to have said that. Nikki.
Thanks very much. I think that's really great advice, but I wanted to point out that before it even gets to the reviewers, it's really important to follow the directions. There are actual presentation standards that must be followed in your application, and the agencies will reject applications if they feel like everything hasn't been followed and your reviewers aren't going to be able to read it. So there's a step before the reviewers even get to it to help them be able to read them, you know, not from a content perspective, but from a formatting perspective. So please follow those instructions very carefully when you're preparing your applications as well, because the last thing you want is to prepare an application and have it rejected because it was, you know, you didn't follow the proper presentation standards. But that's all. Thanks. I think Brendan, I think it's over to you. Did you have your hand up?
Sure. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, so just to round up about the points that you know, kind of really look odd in a bad, or that really stands out in a bad application. One thing I have experience with, it's several times has happened, is that a student will refer to a project as part of a funded grant. So your supervisor may have shared a grant with you that, you know, they just got, and you literally can see that they just copy and paste the intro of that grant into the proposal. So I have actually seen a proposal where the whole first page is just background description. There's no description of project. I don't know what you're doing. It's just, you know, this is the background, and it's just kind of like, where's the rest of it? And don't do that. Make sure that you you know, read the project and digest it. You know, rewrite it. Like, even if you have to, you know, even if a lot of the word you can use, you know, the ideas, that's fine. But, you know, you have to make it your own. You have to make it your own, and you have to make it relevant to your story. We can totally tell if it's just cut and paste. Yeah. So and that goes true with the leadership part as well. Don't just, you know, list stuff down, and make sure that everything is woven together nicely. So I just want to round that one up. Thank you. Back to you, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Brendan. So another one I'm going to ask here, I'll send it out to Kimberly. When completing the Canadian Commons CV, how much should we write in describing our extracurriculars? So how much detail is a good amount of detail? Kimberly?
Thanks, Adam. Sorry, wouldn't unmute me for a second. This is a hard question. So I see the NSERC applications primarily, which actually don't use the CCV. They use their own internal metric. So I'm not actually sure that I can answer that, because I don't know. I presume this is for CIHR or SSHRC. So I think maybe I'm going to pass that along to maybe Brendan. I feel like you could probably answer that.
What is the question again? Just
so, Brendan, on the CIHR application where the Canadian Commons CV is included as part of it, how much information is a good amount to add for the extracurricular?
How much information? Oh yeah, so you definitely want to put some work into, you know, explaining your roles and, you know, what that, you know, what did you actually do in those extracurricular activity, you know. If it's a question about like how, you know, like what type of extracurricular activity, you know, I wouldn't necessarily throw like everything out there, you know, but, you know, things that are relevant to your leadership, you know, development, to your personal development, to showcase who you are, and I would make sure that those are in there and contextualize it. So Yeah, I think that's your question, right? Like how much detail or how many of them do you need to put down? I think it's how much detail, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
As detailed as it can be. Yes, I would say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. So we had a question on here as to whether or not a PhD student could apply for a master's level award. And so I might just send that one over to Nikki to provide a quick response on whether or not students in the PhD program are eligible to apply for master's level awards. So, Nikki?
So students that are in their first year of their PhD are eligible to apply for a CGSM award. But beyond that, no. So it's just students that are in their first year of their PhD program that are eligible for CGSM. I think that's it. Thanks, Adam.
Great, perfect, thank you. So just working through here. Yep, so someone has provided a very nice clarification within the chat that for the CGSD, NSERC, the CCV separate form, it's part of the NSERC application. I believe it's part of the form 201, but Kimberly, you're familiar with the NSERC application. Is the CCV part of that, or is it a different component?
So NSERC uses the form 201, I believe, actually not the CCV. At least at the federal level, but that I think at Dal uses both initially. But I'll pass it to Nikki because she's got her hand up.
For the CGSM application, there is a CCV required. So from the doctoral level, it varies from agency to agency, but in CGSM application for all 3 agencies, you must include a CCV.
Perfect. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Nikki. The last one in terms of questions that we have in the queue is, if I'm a new student at the PhD studies and don't have any PhD transcript, is it possible to apply for the NSERC scholarship or other? So I'm assuming this is referring to whether or not they're an entering student who has not yet started their program. So are newly entered students eligible to apply for these awards? I believe the short answer on that is yes, but I welcome if anyone else on the committee would like to add anything to that. No, so I don't see any hands. So yes, if you are an entering student, you're eligible to apply for the CGSD awards. So I don't see any additional questions coming in. Aaron, was that a hand? Yep, so I'll actually just jump quickly over to Aaron to add to that response.
The only addition that I would make, and this is really just reiterating what Adam was saying, but with my words, I suppose obvious, is that if you're starting a new program, so starting the PhD program, you will have your university that you're enrolled with will have records of your enrollment, right? So those, you may not have completed courses yet, but they will show that you are enrolled in courses and these sorts of things. So so it feels like you're kind of coming out of nowhere, but there are, so if you're in your first semester, for example, this is something that we talk about all the time with graduate students in the English department who are saying, well, I haven't, I'm just in courses. I've been in courses for 5 minutes, literally. What is my transcript? And your transcript is the fact that you're enrolled in the program. So I don't know if that's a useful clarification or addition, but I've made it nonetheless. Adam, I'm done.
Perfect. Thank you, Aaron. And that is an important point, is that if you are just starting your program, even though you may not have any grades on it, having that up-to-date transcript helps to confirm that you are enrolled. And so yes, it's good. So and one last question that popped in is whether or not a first-year PhD can apply for both the CGSD and CGSM award. That one was answered a little earlier. The answer is no. You have to choose one to apply to within a given year. And for the CGSD, the CCV is only required for some of the agencies. Other ones end up using a different format. So I think we've addressed the vast majority of the questions on here. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you to all of our panelist members for their helpful insights in the discussions, as well as our audience members for the questions, for joining us for today. I'd also like to thank 2 individuals that have been working behind the scenes. So Mabel Ho, who has been looking after the question and answer session, and our producer, Puya Maradi. And at this point, I'd like to welcome you to keep an eye out for announcements leading into a late September, October about a similar session for our harmonized scholarship process that includes applications to things like the Nova Scotia Graduate Scholarship and the Killam Awards, for which many of those are open to international students, so it's a little bit broader audience. So at this point, I'll wish you the best of success in the upcoming year, and we hopefully look forward to seeing you at Dal. Thank you very much.